realized that my life was now going to be divided into BC and AC. So before cancer and after cancer. And in addition, the fact that once you're a cancer patient, you're actually a cancer patient for life, regardless of whether you are in remission or you get some reprieve from your treatment.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Africa Within podcast, where we will be talking about breast cancer. Breast Cancer Awareness Month is an international health campaign held every October. During this month, the aim is to promote screening and prevention of the disease, which affects over 2 million women worldwide. So we know that breast cancer is the second most common cancer in women. What is breast cancer? Breast cancer is described as a disease in which abnormal cells grow out of control and form tumors, and if these tumors are left unchecked, they can spread throughout the body, becoming fatal. In this week's episode, we speak to Alison Tucker, a breast cancer survivor and a South African author of the book titled My Best Worst Year. Okay, so hi Alison, and thank you so much for joining me on the Africa Within podcast and for availing yourself to talk about such an important health conversation, as we know that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Thank you very much, Nontobeko. And I'm so glad that you see breast cancer as being something worthy of talking about. So whether it's October or any month of the year, it's something we should all be talking about more to make sure that people take it seriously.
Yeah, that's true. Could you please just talk about who you are, how you got involved in breast cancer advocacy?
Yes, sure. I'm actually a businesswoman. I'm a consultant in branding and marketing. So that's what I do as a day job. But I got an unwelcome Christmas gift in 2016. The day before Christmas, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I always thought I was such a fit, healthy person. I never got ill. I didn't even get the common flu. And the next thing I had this cancer label. That's really how I entered the world of cancer. And through the experience I had, I felt compelled to put it to good use afterwards, making me an advocate for breast cancer awareness and involvement.
I can imagine that finding out that you have cancer would somehow, alter your life or your day-to-day activities and bring about mixed emotions. What kind of emotions did you have to deal with after finding out that you were diagnosed with breast cancer?
Well, it's quite a shock when it happens, as you can imagine. And in my case, normally they would tell you face to face, but I had a what felt like a hard mass in my one breast. And I used to go for mammograms every year because I have a history of breast cancer in my family. My sister, my elder sister had breast cancer. But I had booked to have my mammogram. So I had the mammogram and ultrasound on the 22nd of December. The next day I had a biopsy. And then it was the day before Christmas, and I didn't want to wait for the results. I was also going to Thailand on holiday, and now I had this thing looming over me. So I got permission to get the results over the telephone. And I was in the shower, and my phone rang. It was a Saturday morning, and I got out the shower, put the towel around myself, and answered the phone. And it was the pathologist who was phoning. It was a pathologist, not the oncologist, as would normally be the case, or the doctor. Because the pathologist was a family friend, and he'd been given permission to give me the results. And when he told me I had breast cancer, I just stood there after I put the phone down, and I thought, what now? But I had a hair appointment. I was going off to the hairdresser. So I just went into autopilot. I got back into the shower, finished showering, got downstairs, and then went off to the hairdresser. And once I sat in the chair at the hair salon, that's when it finally hit me. And then I just burst into tears and I started crying. But the emotions it's quite difficult because on the one hand, at first you don't really accept and take it up as your issue. You almost feel like you're dreaming. Once I could say my oncologist or the word cancer more easily, I realized that I'd taken ownership of my illness and that I was going to then start dealing with it. But initially, when you're in that stage, you don't really want to speak to people. So I felt very comfortable messaging people, and I was more than happy for people to know, but I just didn't want to speak to people. I sort of hid away in my room, and I just relied on messaging. and probably for fear of breaking down and showing a whole lot of weakness if I did speak directly to people. And then also
Yeah.
part of the emotions are things like I suddenly realized that my life was now going to be divided into BC and AC, so before cancer and after cancer.
Mm.
And in addition, the fact that once you're a cancer patient, you're actually a cancer patient for life, regardless of whether you are in remission or you get some reprieve from your treatment. So there was
Yeah.
all that to come to terms with. But you do get there eventually.
Just how prevalent is cancer? Is breast
Oh,
cancer actually?
globally, there's a sort of accepted stat that says that 1 in 8 women will get breast cancer in their lifetime.
Yeah.
Now, it's a little bit misleading because in South Africa, the latest stats we have from the National Cancer Registry are from 2022,
Okay.
and they are based on histologically diagnosed cancer. So that means everything that goes through the labs. So it probably
Mm.
is not catching people who have breast cancer and don't know it. There could be a lot of women in the rural area who have breast cancer who haven't had the educational awareness to know how to get tested.
Yeah.
You may even die from not having had treatment. But in South
Yeah.
Africa, then the overall stats from the labs is that 1 in 26 women will get breast cancer during their lifetime, and they look at the sort of 0 to 74-year age group.
Mm-hmm.
So although it says 1 in 26, it's probably closer to the 1 in 8 that is the global norm.
Yeah.
And then what's important to note is that it's actually not just women that get breast cancer. In South Africa, the stat for men is 1 in 930 men. So 930 sounds like a lot, but if you take the
Mm.
F&B Stadium in Johannesburg, and if that stadium was filled with men, 102 of those men sitting in that stadium would get breast cancer, and people
Wow.
don't realize that males get breast cancer.
Wow.
So
It's very interesting that you mentioned that. Yes.
yeah, breast cancer amongst males is actually more prevalent than
Mm.
testicular cancer. So testicular cancer is 1 in 2,000, whereas
Okay.
breast cancer is 1 in 930. So important for people to acknowledge that as well.
Wow. Wow. It's very interesting that you mentioned that men also get breast cancer. Would you then say that they would get the same symptoms as women? Like, would they get a lump?
Well, apparently, look, I'm not an expert in this, but
Okay.
apparently they can have lumps, they can have discharge. So some of the
Yeah.
symptoms are very similar to women, even although they don't have as much breast tissue as women have. I did a
Mm-hmm.
talk once at a school, and afterwards someone came up to me and said, "Thank you so much. Do you know, I've got a friend who's a male, and he keeps
Mm-hmm.
on having all these symptoms, and I never even thought that it could be breast cancer. I'm going to now
Mm.
take him to to get the right medical care." So it's just people need to be aware of
Yeah.
males and breast cancer. Probably also worthwhile noticing that you can be any age and get breast cancer. So in South Africa, in 2022, the latest stats, I think there were 6 cases of women or girls that had got breast cancer under the age of 20. And then
Mm.
you get about a quarter of the breast cancer cases are in women who between that sort of 60 to 70-year-old
Yeah.
group, and then quite a big third between the 40 and 60-year-old. But
Mm.
cancer doesn't know any age. It can be someone of any age that gets breast
Mm.
cancer.
Yeah, that's interesting because we always think that certain diseases or conditions affect certain people of certain ages. So it's very interesting and very informative that you mentioned those stats. Could we talk a bit about your personal life after finding out about cancer? How did it affect your day-to-day activities and your relationship with family, friends, and maybe work?
Nontobeko, I was very, very fortunate because I was probably one of the lucky ones where I was able to continue working through my treatment. And yes,
Mm.
it's not a bed of roses. There were days where it was very difficult to get up out of bed in the morning. There were
Mm-hmm.
also days where I would go to a meeting and then I'd come home and I'd have to spend a few hours on my bed afterwards. But I was
Yeah.
able to continue working, probably made a bit easier by the fact that the nature of my work is project-based work. So it is sort of flexible as well. It's not like I go to the office at a certain time every morning and leave at a certain time every night.
Okay.
But what I did do is there were two things that really helped me cope well. And the first one is from a physical point of view. I've always been a sort of active person, but instead of getting into my bed and curling up and just sleeping all day, I try to remain active. And there is a lot of science that says being an active person will help you and help with your response to treatment as well. So at first, I phoned up my medical aid, my medical insurance company, to say to them, to ask them for leniency so that I wouldn't be penalized for not making my exercise point every week. But actually, I didn't need to worry because I made my exercise points throughout from the start to the end of my treatment, except for 1 week, and that was the week of my surgery. So I missed out that week. So, so that was from a physical point of view. And then from an emotional point of view, the day before I was starting my chemotherapy, I went for a cycle on the Durban beachfront and I got a flat tire. And so I had to push this bike back to the gym. And I was cursing under my breath and I was so angry. And suddenly I stopped and I thought, if you're going to get so in a state about such a simple little thing, how are you going to get through chemotherapy? And it was at that moment that I decided to try and cultivate this mindset of gratitude. So I actually started a gratitude diary, and then which I kept up throughout my treatment, where every day I would just take a moment to think about a positive thought of what I was grateful for or who I was grateful for, to try and help in that more positive mindset. So there's the physical and the mental or emotional well-being side of coping.
Yeah. I'm glad you also tapped into the mental well-being, because I was going to say October is also a mental health awareness month.
Yes.
And I was going to ask how you balanced your mental health throughout. And I'm glad to hear that you were physically active, so you were able to deal with that aspect of your life during that time.
As a matter of interest, I did 20 out of my first 50 park runs ever were done while on chemotherapy. So, eventually there's a cumulative effect. So towards when I was getting too close to the 50, I was tired. And there were times where I would jog a little bit and walk. And eventually, of course, I was trying to walk at pace. But I still got out of bed, and I went to the start and I did whatever I was capable of on the day.
Yeah. So this is all throughout your treatment.
Yes.
For a person who just got diagnosed and now they have to undergo treatment, what treatment options are available, and which one informed? How did you choose the one that you ended up choosing, and what informed your decision?
Yeah. So at the time I was diagnosed, my oncologist said to me that there was, for my type of breast cancer, there was a lot of science and there was a fairly fixed treatment regime. And she said to me, if I was in New York or London or Sydney, wherever I was in the world, that would be the recommended treatment regime. So for me, it was a pretty easy option. I just said, well, I'm happy to submit to science and go that route. I'm well aware that there are many people who have different opinions about the kind of treatment they have. Some choose not to go the scientific route and prefer natural and alternative treatment approaches. But for me, I was very happy to go scientific. Then there were sort of three parts to my treatment. The first part was to have surgery. Sometimes they do surgery after chemotherapy, but in my case, they did surgery first. And when you diagnose as a woman, the first thing a lot of women do is they just say, just take my breasts off, get rid of the breasts. They just want to get rid of that breast tissue. But the reality is that these days there's a preference amongst the medical profession for you to have a lumpectomy instead of a mastectomy if you're a candidate for that.
Yes.
Because the recurrence rate is the same if you have a lumpectomy and radiation as it is if you have a mastectomy. But and also when you think about it, a mastectomy is fairly radical surgery. It's like an amputation of your breast. So there could be a lot of things you have to cope with afterwards, from nerves and all kinds of point of view. So I was lucky fortunate. I was a candidate for a lumpectomy. So I
Okay.
didn't get a whole new pair of breasts. Like sometimes people say, "Oh, well, you're going to get a new pair of perky breasts." I didn't get a pair, but I had a lumpectomy surgery. So the recovery is quite, for me, it was quite simple, and
Mm,
not too onerous at all. Then I
okay.
went into the chemotherapy stage.
The kind of treatment that you went through, what does it entail? What does it involve? And if you could just
Yeah.
speak on
The
that a bit.
Okay, so the surgery itself is literally what they do is they remove the for a lumpectomy, the option I took.
Hmm.
They
Okay.
remove the tumor and some
Hmm.
surrounding tissue as well. And then typically speaking, they also do a thing called a sentinel node biopsy under your arm. And that's really to see if the cancer has spread into the lymph system. So
Okay.
the sentinel node one means they go into that first node where the lymph drains, and in
Hmm.
the olden days, they would just remove all your lymph, and then you'd end up with issues like lymphedema afterwards in your arm, the swelling of your arm. But
Yes.
in my case, what they did is while I was in theatre, they did the biopsy, and they didn't see any cancer inside that lymph node, so they didn't remove
Yeah.
any further lymph. Typically
Okay.
speaking, if that first one does have cancer in it, then they'll take out the next level, and then
Hmm.
the next level. They test in situ, sort of layer by layer of lymph
Mm.
nodes. What did happen though is afterwards in the lab they found a little deposit of cancer cells outside, and the fatty tissue outside the lymph they removed. So that's
Okay.
why I then ended up having to have chemotherapy as well. And the
Okay.
chemo was 6 months, a long haul of four what's common often referred to as red devils, although I don't
Mm.
really like to call it red devil because I like to make friends with the treatment and invite it in to do its job. And then after that, 12 paclitaxels. So the first
Yeah.
four were 3 weeks apart because it's quite a
Yeah.
toxic type of chemo. They give you a chance to recover. And then the 12 were weekly ones, which are supposedly not as toxic as the
Mm.
first time. So
Yeah.
that was, 16 lots of chemotherapy
Six.
doses over 6 months. Yeah.
Mm.
And a friend of mine used to come to me with me to the chemo suite. And actually, we'd
Mhm.
all be sitting in our lazy boy chairs with our drips in our arms, and we'd have quite a lot of fun. We didn't allow that to be a negative place. So if anyone
Yeah.
was negative, they'd very quickly be shut out. And
Yeah.
I meet lots of wonderful people, and we shared stories, and we came from all different walks of life. It was quite sociable, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
But chemo has lots of side effects. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not something you want to do if you don't have to do it at all.
Yeah. What were those? Speaking of side effects, what were those side effects that you had challenges with while you were going
Yeah.
through chemo?
The big one, of course, is hair loss. So
Okay.
my entire life, I had blonde, wavy hair,
Mm.
and of course, I lost every hair in my body. And what grew back was a different color and a different everything. So suddenly,
Yeah.
when I looked at myself in the mirror afterwards, it was a different person. Wasn't me. Took quite a
Mm.
while to assimilate the new identity and to feel like the person in the mirror was actually me.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so the hair loss is a big one. The big one for women. I did use wigs. I chose to use wigs. Some people do, some people don't. And in fact, I thought I was quite cool because I was joining my African sisters who rocked those wigs so wonderfully. And I took a lot of tips out of their books on how to wear them and what to put underneath the wig so I didn't get an itchy
Yeah.
scalp. And
Yeah.
a friend in Australia sent me a box of her wigs. So
Mm.
once I started having fun with them, I had short ones and longer ones, and I had they were mostly blonde because I thought I was blonde and I wanted to be, still feel a little bit like myself.
Yeah.
So that was the wigs. But there are things like, your fingernails
Mm.
get terribly damaged from the chemotherapy. Your skin gets terribly dry.
Mm.
Your toilet habits change. Your
Mm.
Sometimes people get sores in their mouth and sores in their nose. The
Yeah.
fatigue, the weakness, what also happens is with a lot of cancers, a lot of chemotherapy, when people are going through treatment, they lose weight. I think
Mm.
breast cancer patients, on the other hand, often put on weight because of
Mm.
hormones and things. So that's another side effect you're contending with. You're feeling dreadful, and also you're putting on weight and not feeling good about
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
The chemotherapy works on the fast dividing cells, so that's why you lose your hair, because your hair and your nails are fast dividing cells. But what also happens is that my facial skin actually felt beautiful because that was regenerating all the time, you know. So that was the one positive I had. I felt like my face skin was good while I was having chemo. Yeah, after the chemotherapy, after 6 months of chemotherapy, I then had radiation, which
Okay.
is it's much quicker, because when you go for chemo, you sit in the chair and you wait for that infusion. When you go for radiation, it feels a bit like a factory, going through the factory system, because you're sitting there, you get undressed, you get on the table, they have your whatever they need as props for you, and the machine does its thing, and then you're out of there. But it's
Okay.
onerous because it's every day. So I had 30 days of radiation,
Okay.
almost consecutively. I had little rests over the weekends, but then picked up again on the Monday.
Okay.
And that there, you get fatigue. At first, you think, oh, this is a breeze. What, like, I hope it's working because nothing's happening. But eventually, you end up with a very burnt patch of skin, and you get very fatigued, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, radiation is also a key part of breast cancer treatment. Just for info.
Radiation comes after chemotherapy, right?
So it depends
Or is
very
it part
much on what kind of cancer you have, your breast cancer. There are different
okay?
types of breast cancer. There are also different, depends on whether you're having a mastectomy or a lumpectomy. Yeah, so it's quite difficult to have a general rule. In my case, the sort of
Yeah.
typical, mine was a hormonal breast cancer, and the typical treatment after having surgery and chemo was the 30 doses of
Okay.
radiation. Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah. You spoke of your medical insurance, and that tells me that you have medical insurance.
Yes.
For a greater number of South Africans that like living in rural areas that don't even have access to such quality health care, and they depend on government hospitals. Not to say that government hospitals don't provide quality health care sometimes, but in terms of treatment options, do you know if they have access to some of the treatment options that you had because you had medical insurance?
Yes.
And yeah, considering the fact that many live in rural areas, a lot of women may not even have that option. Do they get the treatment that they need and that they deserve?
Nontobeko, I'm so glad that you asked that question, because it's actually quite a sad state of affairs. And it's not only rural women, it's even many women in the urban areas who are close to big provincial hospitals are still not getting the cancer care, or any level of cancer care close to what I was able to have. And it's actually something that while I was going through the treatment, I felt a certain level of guilt that I was able to get the treatment when there were so many people in my shoes that weren't able to. So just to demonstrate that, at the time I was having my treatment in KwaZulu-Natal and in Durban, I don't think there was one state oncologist available in Durban for a period of time. And it
Yeah.
also, one of the big provincial hospitals had their radiation equipment, but it wasn't working. So it meant people were sitting there, people who potentially could have died because they didn't have access to the treatment early enough
Yeah.
in the illness, which
Yeah.
is a very, very, very sad set of affairs. And that's why I
Yeah.
think even basic education of educating women on doing monthly breast examinations, because that they can do themselves, no matter where they are, if they're far from facilities, to at least screen themselves in the first
Yeah.
instance. It's important.
Yeah. So because I know we were talking about how every day it should be a good day to talk about breast cancer. It doesn't have we don't have to wait until October, but the fact that we still have to wait for October for organizations to now and activists to now talk more about this issue. What do you think? Communities, international stakeholders, and governments could be doing, to try and educate people more on
Yes.
breast cancer.
But for me, it's, there are a whole lot of clinics out there, but are they equipping those clinics with the right type of information and the right, calling on women to come and be tested at the clinics even? Is there, and it's testing and awareness. For me, those are the two big things. And then in addition, of course, having the right equipment. There was a study done. In fact, I came across it this morning, so I'm going to look down here to see what it was called. It was an April 2021 study.
Okay.
It's called Cancer in Africa, the Untold Story. So it was about the whole African continent. And one of their key conclusions was they said that Africa suffers from a shortage of medical equipment and research resources. And then it talks about being the things that will make a difference is the opportunity for genetic testing and for new targeted therapies. So having the latest kinds of therapies available to women in Africa when they are diagnosed. And in fact, the same goes for prostate cancer for men as well. They said that the breast cancer statistics in Northern Africa and Southern Africa are the highest. And in North Africa, it actually doubled from 2002 to 2018. The breast cancer stats doubled, which says to us that there's a need for Africa to do more. But for me, it's at the very start, it's about educating women. There's also something else, and that culturally, it's sad that some people die with a cancer diagnosis, die not of their cancer, but they die of starvation. And I believe this is because there's so many myths around cancer. Some people think that cancer is contagious. Some people think that, someone was diagnosed with cancer because they had done something bad. They're a bad person.
Yes.
So even sometimes in some communities, families are not taking care of their family members when they get diagnosed. They literally cast aside, and they end up dying because of myths and not getting any care, not even basic family care within the family unit, which is terribly sad.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think within our African communities, we still have a lot of not just misinformation, but a lot of superstitions about certain diseases, and then we think they affect certain people because they have done something and they've done something wrong. It's interesting that you bring that up. Yeah. Could we talk about your book? I know you wrote a book.
This is it.
Yeah. So you wrote the book. Why did you feel that it was important for you to write this book?
So, I'd always said I'm not an author, I'm not a writer. In fact, that's not my skill set. But when I was diagnosed and my friends, I was surrounded by the most wonderful group of supporters and friends. But when they saw how I was coping, as they got a wind of other people being diagnosed, they started referring them to me and saying, do you mind if I get this person to call you so that you can give them some tips, given that you're already in it? And I ended up with people locally and globally we were chatting on WhatsApp, women I had never ever met, but I just connected with through cancer. And I try to share the things I've learned to prevent them from having to learn them themselves.
Yeah.
So it comes down to little things like when you go and choose a wig. Now, when I had cancer in 2017, microblading wasn't a big thing at that stage. And let me tell you, when you lose your eyebrows, it's more freaky than losing the hair in your head. It looks very funny without eyebrows. But so when you choose a wig, if you have a fringe, you almost want to choose a fringe that's slightly longer so it covers the area where your eyebrows go. But if people don't tell you that, you're not going to know it. Or similarly on wigs, you think, oh, straight away, I want a natural hair wig. I only want natural hair. I don't want fake hair. And then quickly, what I learned and what I was fortunate enough to learn from the place I went to get my initial wig is that actually synthetic hair wigs are fantastic because they're easy to manage. You don't have to style them. You just wash and put on your head. Whereas if it's real hair, you've got to style that wig and try and do it, So, so I learned a whole lot of tips. And eventually I thought I can't lose what I've learned because it's too valuable for all the many people who are going to be diagnosed afterwards. And that's why I started writing notes initially. I said, I'm not a writer. It's not a book. I'm just writing these notes. And then I felt like if someone contacted me, if they were interested in chemo, I could send them the chemo notes. And then there was a publisher, Tracy McDonald Publishers, who expressed interest in publishing it as a book.
Okay.
So then I became an author after always saying, oh, I'm not a writer. And I guess that's another lesson in life. We label ourselves what we are and we aren't, but sometimes we might be able to do what we think we aren't, So I wrote the book really, and although it's about breast cancer, my breast cancer experience, it's also targeted at anyone who has cancer, but also their supporters and their family. So there's a section in it to try and help people who are supporting people who have cancer. So things like what to say and what not to say. For example, when I was ill, if someone said to me, "Oh, hi, how are you?" I wanted to say to them, "You mean besides the fact that I got breast cancer?" Whereas if they said to me, "How's your day been?" It meant I could say, well, "I've had a good day," or "I've had a bad day." Or if someone said to me, "Oh, don't worry, everything's going to be all right," I wanted to punch them and say, "But it wasn't all right when I had my biopsy." And cancer, you go forwards and you go backwards and have a setback, and you forwards and a backwards. So what about all those setbacks? It wasn't all right. So instead, one could say something more along the lines of, "I understand what an anxious time it is for you. I really, really hope that it's going to go well for you." So those kinds of tips are included in the supporters section.
Yeah, I can imagine that the book is helping a lot of people who are affected by or had or have breast cancer. I think it has so many insights on how, like what you just mentioned, how to speak to somebody who has breast cancer. Let's say somebody just found out that their sister or their loved one has breast cancer. How can they best support them?
Right. I've got a sort of motto that I teach people when they ask me. My response to that question is to say, just do, don't ask.
Okay.
And by that I mean, if you say to someone, "Oh, what can I do to help you?" or "I'm here for you," what can I do for you? People very seldom ask for help. So people will often say, "Oh, thank you very much," but they'll never, or certainly if they're the kind of person like I am, I don't often phone someone and ask for help. In fact, the day I used the words, "I need some help," first day I think in my life I said that was the day that my hair was all matted in dreadlocks and was stuck against my head, and I had to get a friend to come chop it off for me. But so it's better to try and anticipate how you can remove stress from someone who's been diagnosed life instead of asking them what you can do. So if you also when you're a cancer patient, little things feel big. So no matter how little the things are that you're doing, sometimes it can help a person. An example is I had been to a food and wine pairing evening, and I had ordered some wine, and it had arrived for collection. It was only about 2 kilometers down the road, but it was on my list, and I knew that I had to get down to collecting it. And a friend of mine, she didn't phone and say, "Would you like me to fetch your wine?" She just sent me a message saying, "I'm fetching your wine for you today, and I'm dropping it off." And that little thing made such a big difference for me. And so just the motto is, don't ask, just do, and look for ways to remove stress. Another tip I would give is, you feel very overwhelmed because everyone wants to be kind. So they're all sending you messages and they're asking questions. But that adds stress because you feel like you've got to answer everyone. So if you're part of the close support group, perhaps you can help by setting up a communal WhatsApp group where you then put out broadcast messages and updates for people. So everyone gets the information one time, the same information, instead of the cancer patient having to continuously send messages. And for visiting as well, if a kind close friend can help coordinate that, instead of everyone being kind and arriving with gifts, but if everyone visits for a half an hour a day and you have 4 visitors, that's 2 hours. But if they all come at the same time for half an hour, that's less onerous for you. Yeah. So little things like that.
Okay, got you. For a person that just found out that they have breast cancer now, I know that everyone's journey is different, and you just said that also there's different kinds of breast cancer. But how, let's say, how would you what advice would you give to that person who just found out that they have breast cancer, and maybe just like some of the tips that worked for you when you were dealing with breast cancer at the time?
Yes, so I would say to them, firstly, is that breast cancer is not necessarily a death sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So, not everyone that gets breast cancer is going to die. In fact, a large proportion of women who get breast cancer are going to live and live very long lives. So, that's the first thing to know. And then, secondly, I would suggest to them that they don't rush, that they get the right medical advice. And for some people, it might mean that they've got to see a surgeon as well as an oncologist, and they need to feel a good fit. If they don't feel a good fit with the oncologist, try another one. My oncologist, in fact, tomorrow I've got my 6 monthly checkup, and I'm quite excited because I love seeing her because she's just wonderful. So find the right fit for medical people.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and then the things I mentioned earlier on, try to stay active, or even if you've never been active, if all you
Mm.
can do is walk around the block, be out in nature, in natural, out in the fresh air. If that's all you can do, try and develop a habit of that on a daily basis. And then
Yeah.
watch not only your physical health, but your mental health as well. Try
True.
and make sure that you are able to get into a positive mindset, because
Yeah.
you can spiral very quickly into negativity, and that would be disastrous in trying to cope with your treatment.
Yeah. Um, I know this is common information that is out there, but what should people be looking out for? What can they look out for? Like, what are the symptoms that they could look out for just to check if they at home
Yes.
without even having to go to a doctor?
So some of the most common symptoms are things like a lump. People often say that they feel a lump. Now, in my
Mm,
case, the lump that I felt it felt almost like a stationary mass of tissue. Just felt
mm,
different. You get to know,
mm,
your own breast's shape and size and everything. So if there are any
mm,
changes, you've got to be aware of that. For some people,
mhm,
they might have some nipple discharge. I didn't have
mm,
that, but I know people do, or an inverted nipple, or a dimpling of their skin.
mm,
But the reality is that sometimes you might not even have felt any of those things. You might go for a mammogram and they will pick it up, even if you haven't picked it up. If you've
yeah.
got very dense, fibrous breast tissue as well, it's sometimes more difficult to feel if there is a lump. So that's something to consider as well.
Okay. Um, how do you celebrate yourself and your survivorship, and what is next for Alison in terms of what is your next step in terms of
Well,
your path to healing?
yeah. Well, I have the title Cancer Survivor, which I earn very gratefully.
Mm,
However, I'm still in the aftermath of cancer, and this is what people don't realize, is that once you finish your treatment, then actually some very hard work starts. People
mm,
don't talk about the aftermath of cancer, and it can sometimes be even more difficult than the treatment period. You're trying to get
mm,
your physical appearance right. Sometimes you're on meds, you've put on weight, you've got all these side effects you're dealing with. Emotionally, you've got this huge fear of the cancer coming back, excuse me, coming
mm,
back. You also have this very real phenomenon that's called survivor's guilt. So when
mm,
I see people who are re-diagnosed, or people who are dying from cancer, I feel
mm.
terribly guilty that I'm still here, or that I haven't had a
Yeah.
reoccurrence yet. So yeah, and I'm still on medication. I'm on a hormone blocker, and I have been on
Okay.
it for 7 years now. But
Mm,
tonight might be the night that I take my very, very last hormone blocker, because I have my oncologist appointment tomorrow. And the last time around, she said October will be the stopping time. So if she confirms that tomorrow, I will be so glad to get rid of all those side effects of the drug, but I will
yeah.
also feel very exposed because that layer of protection is no longer there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
All the
so
best.
I still live in the fear of it, but I still try to remind myself of being grateful and looking out
Yeah.
for the positives, and
Mm,
feeling good about trying to talk up breast cancer and get other people to be tested and to take it
yeah.
seriously.
Okay. All the best for tomorrow. And I also just wanted to ask, what are your hopes for the future for in terms of breast cancer advocacy and research?
Oh, Nontobeko, if I'm walking down a street anywhere in South Africa, on the African continent, I want to feel assured that all the women, strangers around me, no matter who they
Mm,
are or where they are, I want to
yeah.
feel assured that they would have the same opportunity for treatment that I had if they were
Mm,
diagnosed with breast cancer. I really that is my hope that actually people can get the same access, and not only in terms of the medical treatment, but also the
mm,
support.
yeah.
The support, because I was so fortunate, and as I say, my what was I thought was going to be my worst year was really, as
Mm,
I said, my best worst year. So I would hope that other women could experience what I experienced as well, if they unfortunately are diagnosed.
yeah. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that you think is important to be out there for anyone to just know during this time, this breast cancer month?
Yes. So there are two things that I often write in the books when people ask me to write in the book. The
Mm-hmm.
one is inhale love, exhale gratitude, which
Mm,
means really just when you are diagnosed, just use all the love that you're surrounded by, and
mm,
then find that gratitude, exhale gratitude.
yeah.
And then the other thing is there's another saying that goes something along the lines of a cloudy day is no match for a sunny disposition. So
Mm,
even when you're faced with a cloudy day, trying to look for the good and the positive
mm,
can also just help you cope with what's
yeah.
life's thrown your way.
Yeah. You mentioned something about having a talk. Is that how you spend your days these days? Do you have talks in schools, and like how do you just bring
Yes.
awareness in your own personal capacity?
So what I do is, besides just talking up breast cancer ad nauseum amongst my own community and wherever I am with other people,
Yeah.
I do have a talk that I do, or several talks depending on what I'm asked to talk on.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that really on, when someone gets in touch with me and asks me whether I can help them out for whatever it is that they're staging, that they want someone to come and talk about breast cancer too.
Mm-hmm.
So that exists. And then in addition, like we're doing now, a podcast. Over the years, I've done a lot of radio interviews. I've done some TV interviews. So really, I'm here and available for wherever I can add value.
Yeah.
And I'm not charging or trying to raise money. I'm just trying to help other people who might be in the same shoes I'm in.
Yeah.
One
Yourself.
last thing is, although I know this is an African podcast, and although the book is only available as a paper book in South Africa, it is available online on
Yes.
Amazon as an ebook as well, just so that women or cancer patients or their supporters in other countries in Africa still have access to it too.
Uh-huh. Oh, I'm glad you talked about that. And in South Africa, where can others find it?
Any all the main bookshops. You can
Okay.
order online or go into bookshops, and if they don't have it in stock, they'll order it for you. But it's available through
Okay.
all the bookshops. Yes.
Ah, perfect. Thank you so much for taking time to just talk to us about such an important
Good.
topic. I hope it reaches everyone that needs information on it and it just educates. And I wish you all the best with the journey, as you said, that it doesn't stop now. I mean, you continue being a cancer patient for life.
And thank you, Nontobeko, and all the very best with Africa Within. I'll be
Thank you
a
so
listener.
much.
I'll be looking forward to listening to your podcast as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. You have been listening to the Africa Within podcast, the podcast that focuses on health, peace, and climate change issues in Africa. This Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we celebrate Alison Tucker, a breast cancer survivor and a South African author who made a conscious decision to handle her breast cancer diagnosis with so much positivity. We also celebrate everyone working to bring awareness about breast cancer within the continent. Follow and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. Thanks for listening.